Hello, my name is Dana Clark and this is my interpersonal communication for HSCO 508 at Liberty University. Next slide. The first thing that I want to talk about is what is communication. Communication is defined as the continuous, complex, collaborative process of verbal and nonverbal meaning making. Let's break that down a little bit. The term continuous means that we begin communicating when we are born and it will continue until our death. The term complex refers to the many components of communication, which includes one's tone of voice, choice of words, facial expressions, and various other factors. The term collaborative refers to the way that we are making meaning together. And one quote that I found in the Stewart book that I liked is, "Communication is where humanness happens." Next slide. So what is interpersonal communication? The term interpersonal communication refers to the type or kind of communication that occurs when the people involved talk and listen in ways that maximize the presence of the personal. The personal are those 5 qualities or characteristics that distinguishes people. The 5 qualities of the personal are unique, unmeasurable, responsive, reflective, and addressable. Next slide. My overarching goal. I want to show the love of Christ in everything that I say. Another goal that I have is to not just talk about myself. Third, I would like to engage in conversation without accusing, attacking, or getting defensive. Next, I want to talk without yelling when in an argument. Next, I want to really listen to the person I am engaged in conversation with without giving advice. Finally, I want to listen at a level 1, which is empathetic listening. Next slide. Let's talk about what enlarging the conversation means. The term enlarging the conversation refers to 2 people engaging in meaningful conversation by taking turns talking and by really listening to one another. Next slide. My background. I am 39 years old. I graduated from Middle Tennessee State University in 2000 with a bachelor's degree in social work. I am currently pursuing my Master's of Arts in Human Services Counseling with an emphasis on addiction and recovery from Liberty University. I have been married for almost 16 years. I have one son named Jamie. I am the youngest of 2 children. I have an older sister. I was raised in a Christian Southern Baptist home. When I was growing up, any conflicts that occurred were dealt with immediately. And finally, many messages occur to this day between my parents and me. I'll get into meta messages more in a little bit. Next slide. So let's talk about behavioral blend. At the beginning of this term, we took an assessment called Uniquely You. This determined my specific behavioral blend. A behavioral blend is the term used to describe the 4 personality patterns that combine to form your specific personality. There are 4 types of personality. They are the following: D, which is active or task-oriented; I, which is active or people-oriented; S, which is passive or people-oriented; C, which is passive or task-oriented. Next slide. So my specific behavioral blend, the behavioral blend that is expected of me is IS, or Inspirational Specialist. The behavioral blend that is me is CIS, or Competent Influencing Specialist. Next slide. Some characteristics of my CIS behavioral blend. Some positive characteristics are: I have strong people skills, I am outgoing, I enjoy influencing and interacting with people, people like my friendliness and enthusiasm, I am not pushy or controlling, I do not have to be in charge, I am very happy with others and have a way with words. I am generally a happy person. I like to prepare and research for big projects. I am a great team player. Some negative characteristics are I am more passive than active. I tend to be critical and fault-finding of others. I sometimes lack assertiveness and aggressiveness. I tend to overthink things and worry too much. I tend to avoid conflict. I tend to be indecisive. I am intimidated of others. I do not like doing things half right or sloppy. I am not very directing or demanding. People sometimes think that I am too soft or cautious. Next slide. At the beginning of the term, we also took an assessment on queendom.com. Those results showed that I tend to be good at interpreting other people's words and actions. I like to see things from another person's point of view. I like to practice empathetic listening when engaged in conversation and will do my best to place myself in another person's shoes. I am able to tell what another person is thinking when engaged in conversation and will adjust my behaviors accordingly. There might be times when I pay more attention to the message that I am sending rather than thinking about how it might be received. I also scored a 62 out of 100. Next slide. Potential barrier number 1, meta messages. The problem is that meta messages are defined as the meaning that is not said, at least not in so many words, but that we glean from every aspect of context, the way something is said, who is saying it, or the fact that it is said at all. Meta messages are much more difficult to interpret. Meta messages are often negative, and the philosophy of meta messages among family members is I care, therefore I criticize. A solution to meta messages is to meta communicate. Tannen refers to meta communication as being able to talk about ways of talking. The most important thing to do is to discuss the meta messages you are reacting to. Next slide. Potential barrier number 2, self-disclosure. Problem. Self-disclosure is revealing to another person how you perceive and are reacting to the present situation and giving any information about yourself and your past that is relevant to an understanding of your perceptions and reactions to the present. I tend to be too self-disclosing and too open with other people than I should be. A solution to this is to keep my self-disclosures appropriate. I should only self-disclose to others when those disclosures are part of an ongoing relationship with another person. Also, I only self-disclose when it is a way of improving relationships. Next slide. Potential barrier number 3. Talking without accusing, attacking, judging, labeling, or getting defensive. Problem. Sometimes when I am engaged in conversation with another person, I can accuse, attack, be judging, label, or get defensive. A solution to this is that I can handle this potential barrier by remembering that the main goal of talking is to share thoughts and feelings. Peterson points out that when we are talking, arguments drop off dramatically when we simply shift from pointing at others to pointing at ourselves. I need to remember that I need to point the finger at myself before pointing it at someone else. Next slide. Potential barrier number 4, conflict. Problem. As I mentioned earlier, a characteristic of my behavioral blend is that I want everyone to live in peace and harmony, so I tend to avoid conflicts with others. Solution. I should remember that conflicts allow important issues to be aired. They produce new and creative ideas. They release built-up tension. They can strengthen relationships. They can cause groups and organizations to reevaluate and clarify goals and missions, and they can also stimulate social change to eliminate inequities and injustice. I could also use the saying, I hear you, and I have a different perspective. When using that, you acknowledge that two people have different perspectives without fault-finding or blaming. Next slide. Potential barrier number 5, listening without giving advice. When I am engaged in conversations with someone else, I just want to help them deal with their problems, so I will give advice. As Burley Allen points out, advice givers are rescuers. Advice givers tend to take onto their backs other people's monkeys and make their problems their own. A solution to this is, as Peterson noted, giving someone advice is talking, not listening. I should remember that the goal of listening is to provide safety, to understand, and to clarify. I should also remember that the talker has ownership of their problem or dilemma. Next slide. What is noise pollution? The term noise pollution refers to anything that interferes with the communication process between the talker and the listener. Next slide. Internal and external noise pollution. Internal noise pollution refers to any type of mental disturbance that interferes with the communication process. Some examples of internal noise pollution are fatigue, hearing what you want to hear, positive and negative emotions, and personal issues. External noise pollution refers to any sights, sounds, or other stimuli that draws people's attention away from being engaged in conversation. Some examples of external noise pollution are nearby conversations, clocks, phones, window scenery, room, outside temperature. Next slide. Preventing internal and external noise pollution. Some ways to prevent internal and external noise pollution are the following. You can make sure that the room is not too hot or not too cold. If talking to someone outside, make sure it is not too hot or not too cold. You can move to a quieter area so that you are able to hear one another when engaged in conversation. You can inform the talker if there is something bothering you that is keeping you from being focused on that conversation. You can repeat information that is presented in conversation as a way to avoid conversations. Finally, you can schedule meetings or appointments earlier in the day. Next slide. My action plan in order to improve my communication. The following are some ways to accomplish enlarging the conversation. Nexting, which refers to doing something next, responding fruitfully to what's just happened, taking an additional step in the communication process. Also, fierce conversations are those conversations in which we come out from behind ourselves into the conversation and make it real. I can also utilize the talker listening card as mentioned in the Peterson text. It might be strange using it with family and friends at first. It will get easier as I utilize it. I can listen at a level 1, which is empathetic listening. According to Gritton, empathetic listening can potentially heal relationships and mend rifts between people. I can utilize reflective listening. According to Rodalenko, reflective listening occurs when we try to understand what the other person is feeling. The receiver then puts what he or she has heard into his or her own words. Next slide. In summary, in this presentation, I have discussed the following. What is communication? What is interpersonal communication? What is my overarching goal in order to improve my communication? What is enlarging the conversation? I discuss my personal background and its influence on my communication. I also discuss what behavioral blend is and my specific behavioral blend. I discuss those positive and negative characteristics of my behavioral blend. I discussed the results of my queendom.com assessment. I discussed potential barriers of my interpersonal communications and solutions for each one. I discussed what noise pollution is, what internal and external noise pollution is, and examples, and ways to prevent external and internal noise pollution. Finally, I discussed my action plan for improving my interpersonal communication and achieving my overarching goal. Next slide. The next 2 slides are a list of my references that I used for this presentation. Next slide. I would like to end my presentation with some verses that I ended my Peterson text review with. I love these verses because I feel that this ties in with my overarching goal nicely. It is words that we all need to live by. These verses state, "Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor. for we are members one of another. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil. Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. Next slide. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.